way we would successfully push for a removal of president, either on grounds of incapacity or on the grounds of violation of Kenyan law, having committed a crime under Kenyan or international law, or is gross misconduct, or the violation of the constitution. Allow me to give the floor.
Thank you for that.
Mano, I think we answered those because they are quite a bit.
Yes, kindly, if you can respond to those first.
I'll pick some and then you can pick some. Now, the first thing with us taking a proactive role, I say that LSK has been striving with regards to the protests, yes, because you cannot plan instances of abduction. Though we have been able to get progressive courts that are able to give us blanket orders in terms of access to the different police stations, so that irrespective of whichever police station, we don't have to come back and get another order. But I agree with you that with regards to the future of us taking certain proactive roles, particularly after appointment of cabinet, that is something that we're already thinking around and with like-minded partners on the various strategies that we can employ. And we are humbled because it's by working together with the different institutions that we're able to make a greater concerted effort, because the need is quite large and it's all around the country that we must respond to the different challenges that are arising. Now, with regards to issuing a notice to the police, the problem is it's not the notice that gives you a license to protest. Protests can also be spontaneous. And so you're giving a notice for the purpose of them facilitating the protest. So it's not a directive that you have to give it this way. And I think what the acting IG is trying to seemingly tone down after the court orders. But the aim is to merely just facilitate and provide protection. But it's not that that is the license that you will be able to now protest if you give that such a notice, because we have had even instances where the Nairobi area commandant has regional commandant has refused for people to exercise their right to picket, irrespective. And that is not his prerogative. It's a constitutional right. As long as we are peaceful and you're able to exercise your rights well, and that's why we need to continually be vigilant and raise concerns, particularly when they're goons. And we have seen situations, the ones who call themselves Nairobi business people or city business people with rungus, trying to infiltrate the protests, and those goons that come to take advantage and steal. We need to be vigilant so that those ought to be arrested, because they are not part of the peaceful protest. They're destroying private property and stealing from even the protesters who were just engaging in a peaceful protest. And so as LSK will continue, we are looking at the various questions, both constitutional, and we're grappling on the best strategies on how to come forward. Now, with regards to the other methods that are available, of course, the Law Society has always gone to our courts to raise concerns, because as much as we table our concerns with regards to any pieces of legislation in Parliament, and we have seen how our Parliament has been the weakest link in this country, in this nation. I dare say I've said this several times, and I continue to say it. Our Parliament has failed us because they have forgotten that their role is representation and are carrying out other roles. The courts had declared CDF unconstitutional. It ought to be implemented. It ought to be one of the first things that the head of state implemented and stopped this issue that Treasury is continuing to disburse CDF, yet it's unconstitutional. We need to have the women reps, that fund that is unregulated on how do they account for the monies that are given to them. How much do we actually see benefiting? That money should go into education or health. CDF should go to the governors to actually support development projects, and should be purely for development projects at the county level, so that we can hold our governors accountable in the same manner and fashion we have held the head of state, demanded for accountability and transparency, so that we can actually feel the benefits, and MPs and women reps can focus on what took them there to represent us. One of the speakers has raised the concern that how did we allow independent candidates to switch, yet the opposition and independent candidates made up the majority. And again, to say that we don't have proper leaders who recognize the importance of protecting their members. Once they get in, they sell themselves for the highest bidder, and we see members of parliament changing sides, and that's why we have an executive that is controlling the parliament, and that's why we can see decisions are made at the executive level and implemented to the letter at parliament level. And that's not the kind of democracy that will ensure growth, accountability, and transparency. Because today we would be comfortable to raise, if you had concerns about any cabinet nominees, is to go and table and challenge them through your representative in parliament, knowing full well that your representative is going to stand up for you. But the challenge that we have in this particular parliament is we have parliamentarians that do not listen, that do not want to hear the position of the people, and they will remember you 5 years when it's almost the close of the term. That is when they'll remember that they have an electorate, and they've forgotten the primary purpose in which they went to hold those particular positions, those particular seats. And therefore, with such a parliament, the question is, that's why now the head of state has to negotiate with the people of Kenya, because those who ideally should be representing your voices, should be standing up for you, should be able to share with the executive the kind of position the people of Kenya are holding, have failed to do so. And it's not that we let them, but it's individual choices. In as a nation, unless we demand for accountability and transparency, not just from our executive, but as well from our parliament, because parliament has the ability to vet the budgets that are being used by the executive, have the ability to vet the borrowing powers, has the ability to vet these nominees, has the ability to say no. And the more we keep quiet and they watch and we don't hold them accountable, then we'll continue to see the games that we saw, that in 30 minutes we allowed the army to be deployed, and the army is still deployed indefinitely for this particular period, because even the orders that were given to the court, there's no particular period that is be noted until further period, until they feel that they have restored peace. So is peace when they have stifled the voice of the people, or when they're able to finally listen and sit together and work with the people? And so if we don't have a parliament that is able to vet, a parliament that is able to be held, to hold people accountable, then we'll continue to struggle and strive. And it's high time that we also ask our parliamentarians for accountability, so that we can actually have a government that is working. They can hold the executive accountable, and judiciary as well. We demand from them accountability, that they hold both these two arms of government accountable. Manuel, we can pick maybe the ones that I may not have responded to.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I think you have addressed some of the questions that were asked, and I think it's important to note that the Law Society issued a statement on the question of notice to police before you demonstrate, and of course the courts have already suspended that directive, and for those reasons, I believe that question has been addressed. The right to demonstrate does not require a person to seek permission to express themselves. It's a right under Article 37, which does not require any other person's permission, as long as it's the demonstration or assembly or picketing is peaceful and it's within the law. I don't think, and of course, as the courts have pronounced themselves previously, this is not the first time the IG or acting IG have attempted to take us back to the old constitution, where you would be required to seek permission to exercise a constitutional right. We will be waiting for the court, of course, to render its final determination on that question by the case under Katiba. On the questions of the cabinet, and I think, Madam President, you have addressed that question properly. We have two processes to actually vet these individuals through our representatives, who have definitely failed us as the members of the public. We expect them to take their work seriously. They have a duty to oversight, to legislate, and to represent. They have actually abdicated their roles, their seats in parliament, because that is the most important seat that has representation of the members of the public. The views that the members of the public are addressing through this citizen assembly and through social media are issues that these members of parliament, we gave powers to represent us in the National Assembly and the Senate, are supposed to actually represent us by ensuring that they vet these individuals, that will not have a cabinet secretary who has been implicated in court cases, that will not have a cabinet secretary who has ongoing court cases, who has been implicated in corruption matters. And the buck stops at them. If you look at the people who are appointed as cabinet secretaries, some of them had ongoing cases in court. Some of them had have been subjected to, have been suspected to have actually pilfered public money. And so these people went through the same parliament, and all of them voted with acclamation. And I think it's important that we hold them responsible for the duty that we have given them. They have a choice either to represent the people who elected them, or to cede that power back to the people for purposes of ensuring that the people will pick a person who can represent their own interests. I'll keep opening up the space. I don't know whether Jatelo, you're there. If you can be able to make your contributions, you have the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President and everyone. I'd love to speak on two things. First is on the cabinet. And I'd ask LSK to give the Constitution, what the Constitution envisages of a cabinet. What does the Constitution see? What's the cabinet that the Constitution wants? I was taking some few notes as I was reading my Constitution. And if you check Article 10, and you remember the other day, the former KRA chairman, Mwaura, the court said he's not fit to hold that office because of our national values. And this same Article 10 on national values talks about equality, equity, inclusiveness, and protection of the marginalized. So I think the cabinet we want is a cabinet that has a third woman, a third gender rule is observed, a cabinet that has a person with a disability, a cabinet that has young people, a cabinet that has marginalized and minority communities. And Article 100 requires Parliament to enact laws to promote representation of women, youth, persons with disabilities, ethnic minorities, and other marginalized persons in governance. If you check 54.2, demands that 5% of elective and appointive positions be reserved for persons with disabilities. If you go to 55, it emphasizes the need for involvement of youth in every stage of governance, and I don't think cabinet is not included in that. Article 27.8 lays foundation to ensure that at least a third of women or men, their third gender role, at every level of governance. Now, if you check the previous cabinet we've had post-2010, Uhuru never reached the third gender role, which I think out of 21 should be at least 7 women or 7 men, because actually women can also be majority. If you check Ruto's cabinet, that was never achieved. So I think by disbanding his cabinet, he had a chance to get it right, but still maybe he's not getting it right. So I think if LSK could furnish him, could advise and tell him that this is the cabinet envisaged by the Constitution of Kenya. Yeah, because I don't think we can. And number two, on recycling, these former cabinet secretaries, do they need to go through vetting afresh? I need to know that. And as we talk about austerity measures and living within our means, what is the cost of vetting a cabinet secretary in terms of sitting allowances and all those things? Why then did he have to dismiss them, to sneak them back? Why did he just dismiss those he wanted to dismiss? That's my question. Then secondly, I'd speak about education. I'm doing some research on the cost of education in Kenya. If you check, for example, CDF is about, every constituency spends 30% of their CDF on bursaries. That's about 15 billion across the 290 constituencies. We have presidential bursary at around 800 million. We have governors nowadays having scholarships and such things, county bursaries. We have Ministry of Education bursaries. Then we have non-state actors also giving bursaries. And you find that we also have women rep, the NGAF, having some allocation for bursaries. And you find that these bursaries are given to people who are your friends or through political affiliations. For example, I don't think anybody will get presidential bursary without connection. CDF, it's the politicians dish it to their supporters. Yet in their manifesto, both Kenya Kwanza and Azimio said they would strive for a Kenya where there is free education. My proposal, therefore, which I invite everyone maybe to think through, is what if we take all these monies? Why do we need 15 billion to go to constituencies and go back to schools? Why don't we have a national education fund whereby all these funds can be put there? Then we ensure that we have a universal free education from primary, secondary to university level. Yesterday you saw the bishops calling the president to change the university funding model. So my suggestion towards this is that all monies that are meant for education purposes be put in one fund so that there is accountability, little embezzlement, and there is no need to give me bursary. Just pay directly to the school so that I go to school and learn for free. So I think those are the two things I wanted to ask on the cabinet, and that on education. I'm very keen on education because I'm a product of free primary education. This Gen Z product of free primary education, and that's why we are able to ask questions that will make our country better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions and contribution. Be Real, are you there?
Yes, good morning, Manua. Good morning, Dr. President. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Kindly proceed.
Yeah, my question is just, it's aligned with what Benji said. How can we file for a memoranda for these individuals that have questionable characters and they have pending cases and they have fraudulent cases still pending on with them? How can we file that? Because I think now we should watch for filing each and every individual at a personal level, and us as if you and your team as Repubono can support that, because this is despicable what's happening, because we're just being it's feeding from left to right. We're not getting any solutions out of this. So how can you file for these people that were elected, actually selected? They were not elected, they were selected, so that we can remove them from those in now in the law legally.
Thank you so much, Biril. Ian, sorry, Arnold.
Thank you once more. I have a question. Mine goes for education, just like Jatelo said. We've seen it go through social media that around 153,000 students are not going to receive help. And we both know for sure that most of these students, they can't support themselves. They depend on government help. But now we see 153,000 students having their education crippled. What does LSK hold in accordance to this, and what do you advise these affected students to do? Because I've seen in more university groups, I think KU groups, and I think MKU, though MKU is a private university, but they are advocating that students go for protests in line with the amendments that are coming in, that they are going to cut the budget for help by around, I think it's around 4.2 billion shillings. So what is the stand of LSK on this matter? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We can take one more before I allow the president. D, are you there? You have the microphone.
Okay. Mine is a question to the legal minds that are here. I saw Nelson Harvey post something about that CSs, when they are fired, they can no longer go back or active position or appointed position. I want to know how true that a part of the constitution is, and what is the legal, like, take them to court or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam President, if you can take some of those, if you're there.
Okay. Now, let me start with the last one with regards to the 153 students. These are some of the changes that we are agitating for with regards to the education fund, or we are raising concern with. Help affects so many people with regards to access to education, but also there have been questions on the current free primary education that is there. So education as a whole raises very critical questions. We remember the start of the year, even after the floods, we raised that concern with the ministry and the head of state with regards to, there are several schools that had been flooded, people had lost their homes, people had moved, and yet the government was swiftly moving on to open. As long as schools within the cities could open, they had forgotten about the other schools, that children were going to be disenfranchised. While others move on, them they're struggling, they'll be left behind. And we raised that concern that it seemed that it fell upon deaf ears because nothing was since done. And that's why we're having this even eminent strike, that a notice has been issued, because we even have the larger problem of the JSC that is still ongoing. And so these are concerns we have continued to raise as the Law Society of Kenya. And it's hard time that we also ask our representatives, even in parliament, because they have the ability to affect the budgets. Because you can talk about something, but if it's not budgeted for, then it means there'll be no indication. When you even look at the proposed cuts in the budget and the Appropriation Act, the question that we should be asking ourselves is, we trace where is the money going? Where does the budget say what is going to be cut? Because yes, the executive can cut, but it can cut crucial areas for the citizens to feel the cut and them not to feel the cut. The cuts should be towards their recurrent expenditure, trips, any luxuries that are there, so that they actually budget for access to education, because the education question is large. It's not just about the health students, it's about free primary education. It's about access to books and facilities. It's about the access to school, food that is given to some of the students in school. We have cases of people and children not being able to even have meals. And if it's not for the meal that is sometimes provided in schools, then there's nothing, there's no even access to even something that these young children are able to partake in. So the education problem is a larger problem that we need to deal with. even as we look at the current syllabus and curriculum. So it's not just us patching up with regards to help. Help is a smaller part of the larger education problem that we've been continuing to raise, that the government needs to have serious review and budget towards it, because it's not about promising and talking about it. It's about putting your money where your mouth is, so that we can actually see seriousness in improvement. Amanwa, maybe I didn't write notes. You could let me know the other areas that questions are, and then I can respond. But I see we
Yeah,
have
I think
Abna.
one of the questions
We
that,
have Abna here. We have
yeah,
Lavance here. They can also answer some of these questions with regards to the law, so that where I missed that, they
sure.
can fill in.
Sure. One of the concerns that was raised, I think, by Be Real was which process should the members of the public take when they want to submit memoranda on the particular cabinet secretaries. I don't know if you can take that. Then we can, of course, allow the other advocates on the forum to answer the questions that have been put forth. Madam President, are you there?
Repeat, Manu.
The process that the members of the public should use to pass memoranda on the particular cabinet secretaries before the vetting starts, and how Parliament can be able to have those views from the members of the public. Which process is available under the law?
Well, there's public participation that is supposed to be open to members of the public. You can share to the clerk of the National Assembly. You can share to us as the Law Society, because we'll be sharing our views as well. You can share to your member of parliament as members of the public. So public participation is open to each and every one individual, that you can share your personal views. You can raise memorandums as different groups, at the private sector, public sector. And so it's open. Public participation was the new part of the new changes brought under the Constitution, that members of the public can actually have their voice heard, that you don't need to wait for your member of the parliament. If your member of parliament is ignoring you, you can actually share your concerns, you can actually share your views. One of the laws chief was rendered unconstitutional because it failed on the threshold of actually carrying out public participation. If you see the rejected bill, Finance Act 2024, was because of the overwhelming public participation and the concern that members of the public even had, that they had raised their voices, they had complained, they had issued memorandum, and all of that was ignored. But people were able to share their views, even the Law Society and various groups, with regards to those that particular legislation and the effect and the impact. And so similarly, you can share your views, writing to the clerk, and we'll look for his address and share, so that you can share your views to the National Assembly. We can share your views as well through the Law Society, and we'll forward all those views. And part of the Citizens' Assembly is also for us to come up with joint solutions and recommendations of how we best think that we can share. And maybe it's time we thought about a platform for public participation that enables members of the public to be able to share their views without having to reach for any special numbers or email addresses, that we can actually have a platform that will track all the memorandum that has been shared, so that it's open and transparent, and they cannot say that they did not receive these emails, they did not receive these recommendations, that this number of people were not able to participate and they only got these few views. And as well, a platform that can be an online platform to ensure that as many people, irrespective of the difference in time or distance, we're able to ensure that as many people share their views and their concerns.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I think perhaps also the members of the public should know that if you go to the website of the National Assembly, you will find the respective emails of every other department in Parliament. You can be able to actually present your views through a memoranda, through those emails, and perhaps expect that they write back to you for a purpose of you presenting those views personally when the vetting process will be ongoing. I think there was a question that was asked about the constitution of the cabinet secretaries under the constitution. Article 152 provides for that process, and as you know, the president has powers to appoint a minimum of 14 and a maximum of 24. And I think Jatero asked questions about why the president will dismiss and reappoint the same people, and what implication that has on public expenditure and use and good use of public money. And I think that is a valid question. Some of those questions will be subject to a court process, so that the court can interpret as to whether, whereas the president has powers under Article 152 to hire and fire. And remember, the Gazette notice dismissing these cabinet secretaries was actually gazetted as dismissal. And a dismissal in its explanations and interpretation means you've been fired. And you can't be fired from an office if you didn't commit an offense. So why would you then name the same individuals? And I think that is a constitutional question as to whether the president has capacity to play around with Article 152, especially on the specific powers to dismiss and then purport to reappoint the same people. There are several constitutional questions that can only be answered by the court on that question. And of course, we are following up as the Law Society to ensure that the due process of the law, especially in appointment of cabinet secretaries, is followed. We are hoping that the members of parliament will rise to the occasion when these names are presented before them and forget about their political affiliations and actually do their work, represent the members of the public, represent the views of the people, and ensure that the individuals who are appointed to those offices meet the constitutional requirements under Article 10 and under Chapter 6 of the Constitution. I will straight allow Mr. Nyakundi.
Sorry, Mano, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, this is Abner. If I could perhaps speak, I think there are 2 or 3 questions that...
Yes, proceed, Councillor.
Thank you.
Proceed, Councillor.
Yeah, I think I'll just straight deal. There was a question as to whether those who have been reappointed are subject to vetting. I believe that once the Gazette notice was at secretary, then the process starts afresh in terms of vetting. So I believe that they will be subject to vetting again by Parliament. So just to pick from where you left, we'd encourage members of the public to submit their memorandum if they have views or opinions or something to submit to Parliament in terms of their reservations in terms of their reappointment. Then secondly, on this legal question as to whether the Gazette notice now touches on character or suitability of office, as you have rightly put, this is a new test as regards to Article 152 of the Constitution. But remember that the biggest test is usually on the suitability in terms of gross violation of the provision of Constitution or unsuitability to hold public office as per Chapter 6. Now, I'm just reminded by the Supreme Court decision, especially as regards, if you can remember, the 2 legislators, somebody like Ferdinand Waititu and Mike Sonko. Remember, it is the Supreme Court that held that they are unsuitable to hold public office. So I think maybe it's subject to court decisions, because now perhaps they may appeal to courts and say that perhaps the test as to their suitability to hold public office is has been exhausted in terms of the legal processes. But remember, Article 1 still gives the supreme power to the people and to the relevant houses in terms of parliament. So we'd encourage members of the public to submit the memorandum in terms of their unsuitability if they feel so that it can be considered by parliament during the vetting process. Thank you.
Hi, Mano, can you hear me?
Thank you, Abna. Yes, PLO, proceed kindly.
Thank you, and good morning to all the patriots again who joined this space. Good morning, my able president, Manoa, and the rest of my learned friends on board. So just to pick up on where the president left on the platform, the online platform on public participation, to just enhance the effectiveness of the comments and issues that members of the public raise on different spheres or a spectrum of governance matters. I'd like to inform you that currently we have two policy and legislative in Parliament. One is Assembly Bill number 50. As you've seen, Article 10 on national values and principles of governance. Can't you hear me?
We can hear you now.
All right, thanks. Thank you. So I was mentioning the Public Participation Bill 2023 as one of the legislative interventions that we've had, in the past few months. On Article 10 on the national principles, on the national values and principles of governance, public participation forms a key component and item on such principles. So Parliament has never ever enacted a public participation bill until last year, in September, 1st September, when that bill matured, and it was first read. It was first read on 12th of October 2023. So it is still pending before the National Assembly. And then the other, intervention is on the public policy, the public participation policy. This is the sessional paper number 3 of 2023. So these two items, once they have been formed up, then they will give a clear framework on matters public participation, because it's been long overdue since the promulgation of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Almost 13 years later, that's when we are having a policy and legislative intervention on matters public participation. So I think that is a tragedy that ought to have been remedied ages ago. But nonetheless, we will take what we have and, at least make sure we have a firm foundation, where members of the public can effectively participate on different issues of governance. To move on to the issue of cabinet secretaries, where, someone asked, how will the degazettement of an entire battalion of cabinet secretaries be again some or those components of those who are dismissed still form part of the 11 member nominee that were announced yesterday? So technically, even without going further, the president, in nominating not just 6, but even one of the dismissed cabinet secretaries, is in gross violation of the Constitution and is in gross violation of the oath of office he took, when he was sworn, into office. Because when you look at Article 75 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 that provides for the conduct of state offices, and I'll move straight to sub-Article 3 under Article 75, and this is the Constitution, the apex law, which provides that a person who has been dismissed or otherwise removed from office for a contravention of the provisions specified in Clause 2 is disqualified from holding any other state office. and sub-article 3 is read conjunctively with sub-article 2 and with sub-article 1. And sub-article 1 of that particular provision of the law, which provides that any state officer or a state officer shall behave, whether in public and official life, in private life, or in association with other persons, in a manner that avoids. I'll just go straight to paragraph C. Not even paragraph A and B, paragraph C, demeaning the office the officer holds. And all these grounds are what, is constituted under, sub-article 2, which sub-article 3 now, gives the final verdict that whichever clause, whether it's, sub-article 1, sub-article 2, but the final verdict under sub-article 3 that states that the moment you're dismissal, technically it means the vote of confidence is passed against you. It means that you have demeaned the office, that you hold as a state officer, and CS is part of that. So why would a president, if at all, he was in good faith, with consultation, I don't know to the extent of the consultation he made, but for me, this is gross violation of the Constitution. None of those who are dismissed from office, when the entire cabinet was sent packing, should have been in any way either perceived or real be nominated as a cabinet secretary. So that is the position that I think the president ought to have followed. That is the law as it is, not the law as it ought to be. The president is trying to rewrite the Apex law, and that is, one tragedy, especially emanating from, one person who is meant to be a symbol of national unity, being a divisive figure, to the country. And then the last question I would want to answer was on the issue of involvement of the public and state officer on political activities. Back then, the Commission on Administrative Justice, that is the Office of the Ombudsman, gave an advisory opinion on the participation of public officers and the use of public resources in political activities. So I will just go directly to some of the recommendations that the Ombudsman made, because when they are by law allowed in accordance with Article 249, sub-article 1, and the Commission on Administrative Justice, Act 2011, as read, together with Article 59, sub-article 4 of the Constitution. So when you look at the kind of recommendations that they made, which I think neither the previous government nor this government has bothered, incorporating. That's why you have, all these Harambes being banned for nothing, which in accordance with the president, that there was no law that actually banned Harambe. But there is, ours is just a moral issue. All of these things are dictated by law. When you look at the Section 13 of the Public Officers Ethics Act, it outlaws any state or public officer from using their office to solicit for either Harambes or to contribute, all those things. But people just don't read for the sake of their own reasons. So on the recommendations by the Office of the Ombudsman, one, they said that any appointed public officer should refrain from participating in the activities of political parties or candidates or use the public resources for such activities. The second recommendation that the Ombudsman made was that any appointed public officer who wish to participate in politics or support any political party or candidate should resign from their positions immediately. And I think that is the crux of the recommendation that ought to have been followed. But as was once, synonymous with one, the former majority leader of the National Assembly, that they would rather die than resign. So I think resignation with our public officers aren't synonymous with exactly what they practice. And then moving away from that, the government itself issued a circular, on 22nd of December 2011. And this was about this circular was circulated or disseminated to the PSs, who are the accounting officers in every ministry. It was circulated to the Auditor General. It was circulated to the Clerk of the National Assembly, the Chief Registrar of the High Court, the Secretary of the Public Service Commission, the Director General of the National Security Intelligence Service, and the Secretary Teachers Service Commission, right? And it just dealt with the political neutrality and integrity of state and public, offices. But this circular as well hasn't been fully implemented. Yeah, that is all from me. Back to you, Manuel.
Thank you, PLO, for those submissions. Perhaps if we can take another round. Josephine, are you there? You have the microphone.
Simple question. Hello, Manwa.
Yes.
Very simple question, so I can even drop off as a speaker. Could the society provide us a format for memoranda, making it easy, so that, for example, if I have a format for memoranda, I can then fill it out myself and forward on to the National Assembly? That's number one. Just some guidance on memoranda, so that our memoranda are very professional and very well done. I've done this before, but it's not what we do every day. So that would give it, some good credibility. Number two, police killings have been a nightmare since this revolution began. Police killings have been a nightmare. And Kindiki was on a national televised media house where he was asked a direct question. And I'm asking the society here because it's full of lawyers. Kindiki was asked, when Parliament was overrun by citizens, who are the people who were carrying high caliber weapons, AK-47s, M16s, etc., in civilian clothes and masked? And he was asked, who were those people? And Kindiki answered, I don't know who those people are, and I'm telling you, I'm the Minister of Interior, and I don't know anybody who was firing a revolver, a pistol, a high caliber weapon on Parliament grounds. Those are not my officers, and I don't know who they are, and they have to face the law. My question to the society is a man like that eligible to go back to the Interior docket as Cabinet Secretary? I mean, what are we saying? A sniper killed an unarmed Kenyan, actually many clothed in the flag and demonstrating peacefully. They were not armed. So how is he even eligible to go back as Cabinet Secretary Interior? That's just a humble and simple question, and we want answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those questions and submissions. Maundu, were you there?
Yes, I'm right here. So I have three questions. And the first one will be the recovery of lost funds through corruption, and the culprits are never prosecuted. I don't remember a moment when we had a minister or a CS who was prosecuted for embezzling the public funds. Also, the long-term accountability policy that we should put in the system. Since independence, we have seen revolutions come and go. Like the 1992, let's say it's our parents who fought for that democracy. But after the democracy, we don't see any policy that was put into place that could help so that we don't fall back into corruption or dictatorship. Also, the Auditor General always gives their recommendations after they audit the reports, which are never followed in the county governments, nor as the national government. Those are my questions. And also the public participation. How can it be considered and be implemented by the government? We had a senator, one of the senators, saying that these recommendations by the public are never put into any consideration. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. June, kindly, you have the microphone. Proceed.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I have two questions. My first one is to LSK as a body. I want to ask whether or not it's possible for you to get together with Amnesty International and Kenya Human Rights Commission and file human rights violations and war crime charges at the ICC towards the police heads, the cabinet secretary that got fired and is somehow getting rehired, and every police head that was in any county where somebody died, just a joint level, like a joint suit, like war crime charges, also including like police officers going to hospitals, because hospitals are protected under the Geneva Convention. So that was also like gross violation of human rights. So is it possible for LSK and the rest of the human rights bodies to come up with and just sue them? Like, because the police have been acting the way they've been acting because there have been no consequences for what they've been doing. Like, they literally are just killing people with no consequences. And I don't think anybody even trusts the Kenyan court to even hold them. And even any citizen who was like kidnapped or anything, you can't even like trust that you will be safe as like a witness, because you will be going and facing someone who can come into your home and break in and then just like kidnap you. So is it possible for you to take it up and go above and just go to ICC directly and file war crime charges and crimes against humanity against all these individuals, including all the officers who are also found and named on like the X timelines? Because like Rex's killer as well has already been identified. So is it possible for that to happen? My second point is towards like the cabinet secretaries. I think the problem began when we allowed that individual to go and consult himself and pick from his basket of sycophants. So maybe the movement, the citizens movement, should front their own cabinet, because he obviously cannot be trusted to bring individuals who are qualified. So maybe the citizens themselves should form their own cabinet and front it and tell him, pick here, because it clearly looks like you're not able to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, June. We can take one more, then perhaps we can have responses from the advocates on the forum. Brian Casey. Brian Casey, you have the microphone, kindly. If Brian is not there, we have Simon. Simon? Okay. President, are you there? Perhaps we can take up responses even as we wait for the other questions. And I think before you pick it up, and June has raised substantive questions in terms of instituting a case before the ICC. I think I will leave that to you for purpose of response. A question was asked by Josephine about whether we can, as the Law Society, present a format for the memorandum. If you haven't noticed, all the communications and the memoranda that the Law Society presents to the National Assembly are often shared in our forums and shared to the members of the public. But again, that is a challenge you've given us. We have a committee that is specialized to deal with the memoranda to the National Assembly, and we will be able to perhaps share a format to the members of the public through those forums for purposes of any individual who wants to present their grievances on the cabinet secretary appointees while the vetting when the vetting starts in Parliament, can be able to actually present their views through that process. But I want to also highlight that there is no specific format for communication. If you have information, the Constitution has shied away from procedural, what we call in law, the procedural technicalities. It's the substance of what you write. You can write it on a paper, you can write it on an email, you can communicate whichever way. And I think that is the simplest way to address that question. There is no mode of presentation that is unacceptable. As long as that mode of presentation has been facilitated through the channels that are available, then it's acceptable by Parliament, and they have no reason whatsoever under the law to reject a proposal that has been presented by a member of the public. And I think we have spoken over and over again on the process of public participation and how important your views are, considering that largely the individuals we elected to represent us in Parliament have abdicated on their duty to perhaps even go to their constituents and ask them, what do you need which position are you taking on these cabinet secretaries? What do you need me to address in Parliament? Which side do you want me to vote? Because that mandate, which is donated by the members of the public, seems to be misused by the members of members of Parliament and donated to, party affiliations. And I think that is the genesis of the big problem we have in Kenya, because we have a National Assembly which has huge powers under the Constitution, but we have individuals in those offices who do not actually know how to exercise those powers they have been given. There is a question on whether there's a question that was asked on the recovery of lost funds. I think, Madam President, if you can address that together with June's question on whether there's a possibility of a coalition of suits with other civil societies before the International Criminal Court. If you're there, Madam President.
The issue on lost funds or recovery, well, investigations must be done, and those are hue and cry, and we have agencies that can carry out investigations to ascertain where monies were stolen and tracing to be done. We have the Assets Recovery Authority, and we can also raise those concerns to the Director of Public Prosecutions that he can direct investigations to be done so that the same may be handled and tabled before the citizens, and we see charges being laid. Because as much as you can try private prosecution, it's important that also these agencies that have the capacity and the resources to actually do proper investigations and tracing and get access through court orders to different accounts, they actually implement and carry out their work on that. I noticed there are quite also still a number of advocates. I didn't get the second question, Manwa.
The question was whether the Law Society can lodge a class case before the International Criminal Court alongside other civil society. I thought it's important that you address that question.
We've been working with
yourself.
the various civil society organizations. The question is the threshold, and that's why we are collecting information, we are collecting data as we analyze and what tangible information that can be presented, because it's normally how the threshold to establish whether the criminal courts, the International Criminal Court of Justice can take up the matter. However, the other avenues that we can invite international organizations to come and also monitor and investigate, so that irrespective of the fact that we may not meet the threshold to the International Criminal Court, there are special rapporteurs who carry out who, based on what's going on in a nation, can come in as well and investigate or monitor the situation so that things do not degenerate any further.
Thank you, Madam President. I think June also asked a question on the consequences. I think as the Law Society, we have done what we had to do, and we are requesting for the members of the public to channel information. If you know an individual is held in a particular police station, communicate that information to the Law Society. If you know someone has been held beyond that period that is constitutional, if you know that a police officer, a specific police officer who took away someone's life, who injured an individual, who committed those atrocities, it's very important that if you have documentation in form of even videos, photos, and identity, perhaps it's important that you actually channel that information to the Law Society. I indicated earlier that we have a toll number, and it's on the social pages of the Law Society of Kenya. The number is 0800 720 434. You can access the same on our pages, and then help us have that data for purposes of instituting proceedings. So far, we have cases in court, and nowadays I believe the responsibility has shifted from the office, because we know the individuals who hold these offices hide behind those offices to actually conduct atrocities and maim members of the public. And so some of the suits that we have filed in court are, we have specifically sued or mentioned as respondents the heads of those institutions, the heads of those police officers, the OCS, the IG himself, the acting IG, or any other person in those offices, for purposes of answering to the atrocities meted against the members of the public. We have habeas corpus. I mean, the number of cases we have filed on disappearances, on people who have disappeared, are now approaching 15. And in all those, of course, some of whom are, some individuals who have already been released, you will notice that the majority of the individuals who were arrested have already, who are arrested and who are disappeared have already been released. But there are some people who have been found to have been murdered. And so the Law Society is still following up on those individual cases of murder. And I think so far, it's important that you channel the information. If you know a family who, or an individual who was shot, who was injured by the police, and you know that they did not commit any offense, in any case, the police have no right to shoot people demonstrating peacefully in the streets. Channel that information to the Law Society of Kenya. We can take another round of questions now that we have a majority, quite a number of advocates here. Wakili, Steve, welcome. We can have Simon, then Mark. Simon, kindly. Simon, are you there? Eddie?
Yeah, my question was, now that the president has reappointed 6 of the people that he dismissed previously, will they still undergo vetting? And then for somebody like Kindiki, who we all know ordered for the police brutality before, is he still culpable of being responsible for the innocent lives that we lost? And how will we go about it as citizens? And then there's an issue that has been tabled as a bill by the senator for Kiambu on turning all the money allocated for CDF bursary into capitation. Is it possible that citizens can call out for this thing, so that the government can actually implement that thing and make education free using that CDF bursary allocation, instead of it being put in the hands of MP, while at the same time the courts are declared CDF as unconstitutional? That was my question.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Joyous, is it Joyous or Joy? Kindly, if you have the microphone. Eddie, Millicent. Nyakundi. Nyakundi, are you there? Mark? Can someone hear me?
I can hear you, Jim.
Okay. Jayus, I don't know how that name is pronounced. If you can hear me, kindly proceed. Mark? PLO, kindly if you can pick up on some of the questions even as we add more speakers.
Hi, can you hear me? There's that last bit of that particular question that I'm trying to connect to what I have with me. So just to recap, the last bit, Manuel.
Yes, which question?
Should be the second last question, I believe.
I think the question was on the vetting process, and I think that had already been answered earlier. Perhaps if you can respond to the same, and then the question of Kindiki taking up the same appointment and the question of the killings that happened under his watch.
Well, thank you. First things first, I mean, Professor Kithure Kindiki, as the media, has been highlighting the same as being an international lawyer. For me, I think one can't be an internationally recognized lawyer if one doesn't conform to the international standards on human rights protection and the best practices that actually do govern not just the right to protest, but equally the right to life, which is domesticated under our laws under Article 26. So he is first an advocate, actually, before he is a cabinet secretary. And prior to him being an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, he is a citizen, by birth. So it behooves me that, an advocate of the High Court, a member of the Law Society of Kenya, person who took an oath to protect, defend, and uphold the rule of law will be the same person who will come and violate all these human rights without blinking. And for him, it's actually more or less like, doing that which his office, mandates him to do. But it is wrong. One, on the context of him actually not, speaking on the basis of protection of human rights. Safeguarding the right to protest under Article 37. Equally, just trying to whip the Inspector General of Police. The commandants under him. But for him, it's about optics over accountability, and that's what is ailing our nation, because ours, like I said, is just a moral issue. We have laws, we have good laws with us, but the people implementing those laws are the people who defile, the same laws, and having no issue to the same. Kindiki, just like the rest of the cabinet secretaries who are dismissed from office, should not even be vetted. Why? Because it is, they are already dismissed by virtue of, bringing shame and dishonor or disrepute to the office they held. And like I earlier mentioned on Article 75(3), that is enough for the president, not to keep on defiling the law, because what the president is doing is contempt. It is spitting, on fundamental, rights and freedom. The oath of office that he took when he was being sworn into office. So anyone who was dismissed from that particular list should not even feature, anywhere as a nominee let other new, fresh and blood people who were not part and parcel of a previous cabinet, to come and take the chances, because Kenya isn't short of, capable people. Leaders with ethics and integrity. I saw the tweet by the Homa Bay Town MP. I don't want to mention his name because sometimes, equally it's tragic, how people think. And when he says that, the previous cabinet will never be vetted in this new cabinet. That's a wrong position. The only time that vetting will never take place if there is a reshuffle. But the moment you're dismissed from office, you have to undergo vetting. But there's a catch. If you're dismissed from office, you're not even supposed to form, part of that list of persons that, the National Assembly will be vetting. So I think there is a lot of misinformation, and some coming from people that we would think could have held, others in power to be accountable of their actions, but that the same people, trying to dig, the hole far much deeper than we already have found ourselves in. So that's how I'll respond to that question. On the issue of the killings, yeah, it's tragic, and but not just Rex, Kenyeki, but even 50 plus, souls that we lost. I saw the other day the Daily Nation published, the headline with 50, souls that we've lost along the way, deaths that could have been, avoided. So I think accountability, not just for the IG who apparently resigned, but even, those still in office. So back to you, Manuel. So I'll be listening into more of the questions and respond later.
Thank you, PLO. Thomas, you have the microphone. Kindly proceed.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to ask 3 questions. Number one, you realize that there are so many people who are getting arrested, and these people, these people are getting arrested. Some, they don't have access to lawyers. So suppose I have been arrested and taken to court, and in that case you find that I don't have money to pay a lawyer. 2, I don't have access to any lawyer. So what am I supposed to do in that scenario where I've been arrested because of demonstration, I've been taken to court, I don't have money to pay for a lawyer. 2, I don't have any access to a lawyer. So what am I supposed to do to proceed? Because you realize most of the citizens who are getting arrested, they don't have that capacity to access to lawyers. What are they supposed to do? Then question number 2 is about the Law Society. You need to explain to us that is it fair that every moment we have a public participation, it is only happening in Nairobi, it is only happening to those people who have access to technology. You are being told to send your memoranda through email. So is there a way we can expand the public participation even to the chief's level, whereby a person in Lamu, a person in Wajir can be able to proceed to the chief's office, give the memoranda, and then the government takes over from there? Because when we limit the public participation only to be happening in Nairobi, on the TV, we see in the TV people in the boardroom participating in the public participation, and the environments of the big cities. So what is the space of that citizen in Busia? What is the space of a citizen in Turkana and in all those marginalized areas? So is there a way we can expand the public participation to be taking place through the government avenues, that is through the chiefs, so that we can get close to the people? Then question number 3, the Law Society, please. I want to ask you on the issue of corruption, is there a way the Law Society can regulate its lawyers to the level that you limit your lawyers not to be taking cases of corruption, of people who have been accused of corruption, of like 1 million, 100 million plus, those big cases. So as we handle the issue of corruption, we have seen lawyers representing people who have been involved in capital crimes. So is there a way Law Society can regulate their lawyers so that we handle the issue of corruption by not representing those guys who have been involved in capital crimes? Because I know of a lawyer, I will not mention the name, who doesn't take a case of CK, that is canon knowledge. There are those lawyers, you present them such a case, they will not take it. So if we have a lawyer who doesn't take those cases as a way of trying to bring good moral in the society, so is there a way LSK can also regulate its lawyers so that we limit the issue of corruption by not representing those big thieves in courts? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thomas. We'll take one more, then get the intervention of the President. Dr. Kamande. Dr. Kamande. Dr. Kamande, are you there? Okay, Laibon. Mr. Laibon. Ngeve. Ngeve, are you there? Big ticket. Kindly don't request the microphone if you do not have any contributions to make, so that we allow many contributors. Even as we wait for those other questions, I think some fundamental questions have been placed, especially on LSK by Thomas. I will start with your last question, and I'll allow the President to respond to some of the other questions. On the question of advocates representing corrupt people who are involved in corruption, it's not in the place of the Law Society to regulate its members as to which client you will pick as an individual and which client you will not pick. That is the responsibility of the advocate. They are advocates of the High Court of Kenya. They have the best judgment to choose who to represent and who not to represent. And secondly, there is something we call in law the cab rank rule. The cab rank rule requires that an advocate cannot refuse to represent someone. And again, I put this scenario. We have had people who have been involved in robbery violence shot by police officers. When they are arrested, they are taken to court. They have a right to be treated. And doctors do not refuse to treat people who have been injured while committing a crime. And so there's a reason why the law provides that an advocate cannot actually refuse to represent an individual, because under our constitution, every accused person has a right to be represented by an advocate of their choice. And the reason why the law envisions that is so that the advocate helps the court largely to ensure that an innocent person is not convicted of an offense. Remember, it's not the advocate who determines whether someone is guilty or not. The advocate's work is to represent that person and to ensure that the due process of the law is properly followed, to ensure that the crime so alleged to have been committed, the person so alleged to have committed the crime is subjected through a due process as the law provides, so that when a conviction is made, the rule of law is perceived to have been followed. You've asked a question about access to lawyers, especially the individuals who have been arrested. I think we have been very vocal as the Law Society on representation of individuals who have been arrested by the members, by police officers. And across the country, we have advocates representing accused persons, specifically individuals who have been exercising their right under Article 37 on assembly and picketing. And these advocates have been doing this work pro bono on behalf of the Law Society across the country. And so if you are arrested and you think you're produced in court, trust me, there will be representation from the Law Society on the question if you are arrested while demonstrating peacefully. If you committed other offenses like destruction of property, other offenses that were not specifically in line with Article 37, then the Law Society might not want to take up that matter, because any other crime beyond that, you have a right to look for your own advocate to be able to represent you. But if you are arrested in line, and of course we know there are trumped up charges, certain police officers purport to draw trumped up charges, and I want to thank the DPP somehow to an extent for refusing to charge or allow a charge that essentially is trumped up. And of course, we are keen to look at those charge sheets before we even pick up representation. And it's very important that you know that those are the people we offer representation to across the country. That pro bono service is available to the members of the public through the Law Society of Kenya. And I think the last question you asked was the public participation. I don't know whether, Madam President, you can pick that up, the question on public participation to be being devolved across the country. If you can hear me.
I will on public participation. That is something that we've talked about. Something that we have. This.
Sorry, we lost you, Madam President.
On public participation, the issue that arises is, yes, having to deliver your documentation, but also government ideally should be able to facilitate public participation. And that is why we're looking at, this will be part of the recommendations we'll be picking with regards to how can we ensure we facilitate public participation, that people's views from all over the country can be obtained. And even if it's a platform, we're thinking around a platform that everyone can be able to share views and that it's received. And it's a open and transparent platform that not necessarily to be controlled by government, but open to all members of the public, that you're able to share your views, and even different avenues that we can ensure that whatever memorandum you present, that they're able to reach the destination that ought to. And so that is something that we can think around, because when it comes to bill, government organizes public participation, but we've also seen the concerns over a period of time that where the public participation barazas are hosted are far away from people, so to effectively ensure that certain people are not able to participate. So that is something we'll be thinking around and seeing how to ensure we are able to enable public participation. Someone asked about vetting, and I say vetting must be done for the nominees, because such an analogy that they don't go for vetting afresh would mean that as long as you are ever a public, you are CS or a PS, then even when a new president comes, then you don't need to go to vetting. That's a very narrow-minded perception. Even these CSs ought to be vetted, and people share concerns even within the tenure that they have held those particular offices, as to why they should be granted that other opportunity to continue to serve the people of Kenya. And so vetting must be done, and that's why you have that option to share your memorandum, share your views with your member of parliament or the National Assembly, such that these nominees, Parliament can be able to vet them, take into consideration any views, accusations, or complaints that may have even arisen within their tenure for the old ones that have held office. Then, of course, the new ones must be vetted.
Thank you, Madam President. Can we have Kefa?
Hello.
Kefa, we can hear you. Proceed kindly.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, this is James, not Kefa. But I think I can just speak. I want to just raise two issues. First of all, thank you for this forum. I think we're also learning so much. But I have just something different a bit. First of all, we are having sometimes two or three parallel spaces speaking about the same thing, X spaces speaking about the same thing. So maybe I think to amplify our voices, I think if possible that we're able to have a combined space because we're talking about the same thing. Maybe just my proposal. The other issue is something of a very street thinking mentality. I know, yes, we are talking about continuing with peaceful protest, but still the forces, the police make it appear like it's chaotic and all that. But I have observed one thing, that whenever we are in the streets, you find that when we have, like for example, our ladies at the forefront, it's like the police have a soft spot for them. You find that rarely are they aggressive when we have ladies on the front line, but whenever it's our young men, it becomes a bit more chaotic. So I was just thinking aloud and maybe thinking that also if you can be able to have a very forceful presence of our ladies at the forefront, maybe we can showcase that we are peaceful, and I'm sure the police is like they have a soft spot. I have noted that. Maybe just as Tristo is thinking, so that at least we are able to have people like we feel that maybe the police are feeling like mercy for them. They're not clobbering them. We have not really seen so many young ladies being clobbered, and I think that some of the messages they are portraying outside there, it makes even the protest appear like it's for all of us, the youth. So just my opinion, maybe we can have some more ladies at the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you. We can have Aaron.
Thank you, Mansa. I have two questions. Number one, I think majority of Kenyans support the Gen Z and the issues they have raised. And my concern is that even as we protest and so forth, we need to be sure that we need to follow the legal way as much as possible, so that we have only one country. We don't want to ban it. So my question to Madam President and others who are on the channel on this particular space, what kind of legal steps, practical legal steps can be taken